Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Terry Belcourt. I'm a registered nurse here at the SRNA and with the practice team, and I'm joined by Donna Marin, a registered nurse, nursing practice advisor, and as well as our IT specialist, Tony Drutz. He's here in the room as well. Today I'm going to help facilitate this webinar and also present some content as well with Donna on our Toolkit for Managers of RNs. It's a project we've been working on together for quite some time, and we're happy to have you join us today to learn a little bit more about it. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we are presenting from our office in Regina, which is on Treaty 4 territory and the homeland of the Métis. Just before we get started, I'd also like to just mention how you can interact with us throughout the webinar. You can add questions to the chat, and you can also enter your questions through the question and answer module. So please feel free to let us know your questions that way. You won't be able to speak to us, but we do have a few poll questions that we do ask that you respond to, and then we'll share the results with the people that are here. I think that's it for the housekeeping questions. So we'll start with our webinar. Toolkit for Managers of RNs. This is something that we, like I said, we've been working on probably for about 3 years. And it is something that we've worked on collaboratively with a lot of different managers. What we would like to do right now is just do our first poll and find out who we have in our audience. So with this first question, you can actually answer more than one thing. So if you're an RN and you're an RN manager, please pick both of those selections. Whatever applies to you, you can select. So we'll just wait for a couple of minutes while you do that. And then there's a second question about being familiar with the toolkit, just so that we've got a little bit of an understanding of where you are with your learning and your knowledge around the toolkit, so that we can maybe tailor our content just a little bit more. So we've got everybody responding, which is exciting. I'll share those results. So everybody is an RN. We have 2 managers of RNs, which is great. One that's not, and one that is in a different role altogether, which is awesome. Thank you for being here. And fairly high understanding of the toolkit. So that's great. We're going to try to go through some of the basic information about the toolkit fairly quickly. But if you have questions about it, you've tried to go and use it in some way and maybe you needed some different information, then please do let us know so we can take a look at that and understand better what you need from us. So we'll go now just quickly to the background. So work has been ongoing with this project since about 2015, and it really is, when you look at our strategic plan, around the RN role clarity piece. And so that's where we're trying to get. We're trying to provide resources that help managers, and particularly in the beginning, we were looking at managers who weren't necessarily RNs themselves, and what they might need to know about registered nurses that they weren't getting in other ways. We worked really collaboratively. I'll talk about that in the member feedback section, but we were able to finally roll the at-a-glance documents out in 2017, which was super exciting for us. So moving on to the member feedback, we did a survey out to members to find out what they felt managers needed to know about RN practice. And that common theme, like I talked about, more and more non-RN managers of RNs being in the workplaces and just not understanding fully the RN scope was really what we were trying to achieve, is a better understanding, some useful tools that were really easy to access and informative, and really bringing together all the resources that are out there for a certain topic into one area. We worked with an ad hoc advisory committee, so a bunch of managers, including one non-RN manager, came on board, and we met with them to look at what would be useful, what information would they be looking for. And that was a really, really pivotal thing for us to know that we were on the right track and we were headed in the direction of giving something that people would find useful. So I'm going, oh, this one's still me. Yes? Okay, member input. So a lot of the information that you'll find in the toolkit, we picked topics that were shared with us through that survey, and also topics that came forward from our practice calls, from the advisory committee, and different things that we knew there was a need for additional information. And then what we did was we also joined with the Administrative Nurses Professional Practice Group, and we did a pilot workshop with them in Prairie North. Yes, right? Prairie North. And that was really good. There was a lot of different topics that were really relevant. There was 35-ish managers there from that health region. It went over really well. And so what we found was that there was a lot of good resources for nurse managers from, like, on managing people and different other topics, you know, budget and that kind of thing. But what the little niche that we could really fill was what was the clinical practice, the professional practice, the scope of practice of registered nurses that wasn't met in that forum. So that's when we started really developing these at-a-glance documents that were focused on different topics. So John is going to cover the characteristics, and yeah.
Great. So what we really talked about a lot was making the resources very valuable to managers, and one of the philosophies we really followed when we were doing the development was don't make something unless it's both necessary and useful. But if it's both necessary and useful, don't hesitate to make it beautiful. And we really tried to stick to that vision. So when we decided on the layout, we really wanted it to be easily accessible to managers on their schedule, because managers are very, very busy people. They often have, a lot of pressures on their time, and sometimes even though they have the best intent of coming in and working on things that's on their list, often their day ends up being, focused on the priorities of other people within the unit or situations that arise. And so we needed something that they could access that was electronic, that was printable, that they could maybe take to a meeting and read while they were waiting for their next meeting to start. So we spent a lot of time talking about how to do that, but we also really wanted to focus on how to make that information really practical, because we don't want to waste managers' valuable time, and we don't want it to be something that they don't really need. We don't want a ton of resources in there that they're trying to sift through. We want the things to be really practical and valid, timely in terms of current trends. One of the things that Terry and I are developing right now is on electronic distractions in healthcare, because we're finding more and more that is an issue for managers. They've got people on cell phones or electronic devices, and maybe are not really focused on their work or focused on making the experience of the clients, patients, or residents as quality as they can be, because they're distracted, needing to try and keep up on their electronic device. So we try to look at all of those topics and make decisions about what could be helpful, and that allows us to keep our toolkit very dynamic, given whatever other projects and workload we have. We're trying to bring in new resources all the time. And those resources, really, we look for current, credible resources. Some of them are things that Terry and I have found. Some of them are things that are recommended to us either internally by other staff or by managers that we've worked with. So when we developed all of those at-a-glance documents that Terry was talking about before, We spent a lot of time trying to validate them internally here within the SRNA with our nursing colleagues, and then externally with our ad hoc committee and people that had volunteered to participate in that review. So there's three main categories of documents, and you can see those: clinical practice, professional practice, and scope of practice. But we also wanted one entry point into the toolkit where people could get started. So there's a fast facts for managers. And we really tried to look at what would be things that, whether you were a brand new RN manager or you were a non-RN manager who is now managing RNs, what are things that you would really need to know up front right away, and that, you know, through experience and time, you could eventually learn all of those facts and things about RN's scope of practice, or things where you would have to mandatory report if you had to, you know, manage the performance of someone that maybe wasn't stellar in your unit. So there was all of those kinds of fast facts. I need to, as a new manager, I need to verify that everybody actually does have a valid license before I allow them to move into the next registration year and be providing care. So anyway, we built all of those things in there to try and make it a quick reference for managers and something that was handy and valuable. Then there's also the top 10 lists for new managers of RNs. So that kind of refers people to organizations or really at mostly organizations of, you know, CNPS, who gives the liability insurance. There was, you know, patient safety focused things. There was all kinds of resources that maybe a new manager had never had to really look at or experience in their own clinical care, or they knew a little bit about it, but they needed to find out more, or how to contact those people if you needed them, or whatever. So we wanted this entry point to be really, you know, a lot of information, but in a manageable way. And it would allow people to come and go as they pleased, or again, to, you know, save that, you know, piece on, you know, a printed piece of paper or a website on their desktop so they could access it. So then we looked at breaking it into these different topic areas. And so clinical practice, we have a number of documents in there. So sometimes we would have, you know, managers that would call in to say, hey, I'm not really sure about documentation, you know, or I have an RN who is hesitant to take charge responsibility. You know, what really are RNs expected to do in this situation and stuff? So we tried to build these documents that all had to do with clinical practice, and that would be helpful. And then professional practice, we looked at cultural competence, of course, fatigue and fitness to practice, because that was a question that we got, you know, fairly regularly from a number of different people, interprofessional relationships, and social media. And then we also have the scope of practice, so coordination of care, because that's still a topic where there's lots of discussion. You know, what really are RNs held accountable and responsible to in terms of that, the delegation process, grad nurse practice, because we get that question quite regularly, you know, and so there's, within each of those documents, there's many references and links to sRNA documents, links to other documents that guide professional practice that people can look at. And then, you know, sometimes there's also other toolkits or things that people have built that are very credible and helpful. And so the last one listed on here is, where's the list? And so in fact, I was doing practice call just recently, and I had a person reach out to me to say, where's the list of RN tasks that I can expect an RN to do? And so I was able to direct them to the toolkit in general because they might want to explore that, but to provide that at-a-glance document. And it met the person's needs, and they didn't have any further questions for me once they had actually read that and explored through it. So going forward, actually, should we maybe look at the toolkit on the website?
Yeah.
Terry, I'll actually bring that up for you, and you can actually see it as we scroll through a little bit.
Just switch it over right now. So what you're seeing now is our homepage, the srna.org homepage. If you go to the practice tab, and then there's some practice resources, that's where you'll find the toolkit. So just scrolling down to resource toolkits, then up pops our toolkit for managers of RNs. You just have to click in there, and starting with the toolkit, those are the documents that Donna was just talking about. So the fast facts, that top 10 list, and then you can close and open all of these as you need. So that one that Donna was talking about, where's the list? When you pop it open, then it opens up a nice printable PDF that you can print off and put into a binder if you like. All of the resources are here. So we've made some key points in each one and then reference them. So when we look down here into the resource key, number 1, that's the interpretation of the RN scope of practice document, and it's on page 2. So it's easy for you to then go and find that exact reference without having to scroll through all of these different documents. They're just all there, really nicely laid out. This one is a little bit different because we do go through and we explain a little bit more about each of these resources and how they can be used. We don't do that in every single one, but in this case, that was appropriate to do. And then the other thing that we do try to do, I don't know if there are any, not for this one, but sometimes there's external resources as well, like maybe CMPS has an info law that's appropriate or applicable, we'll include that. So there are those in some of them as well.
Great, thanks, Terry.
I'll stop my share and then
Okay.
reshare.
Okay. So do I have to do something?
If you want to share it again, you just
go up to the top.
At the bottom there.
At the bottom. There we go. Great. So this slide talks about using the toolkit resources. And one of the things that we found when we rolled it out last fall, we had some very, very wonderful and interesting discussions with managers as we kind of traveled around and did a little bit of a road show and introduced it to managers in workplaces. Because as Terry said in the background, in the history, you know, we originally saw it as really valuable for managers of RNs, whether they were RNs or non-RN managers. But one of the discussions that we had when we were using it was that they were finding that it was really, really valuable for the HR partners of managers in clinical units to be able to be acquainted with this as well and to really understand what the accountabilities and responsibilities of RNs were. Because when you were looking at the expectations of conduct of the RN staff, that was a helpful thing for them to be able to look at. The other thing was we found in practice, once we had put it onto the website and we're kind of trying to communicate out that it was available, we were finding RNs contacting us to say, hey, you know what, I looked at these resources and I think my manager needs to see them. My manager has a fill in the blank, fine arts degree. My manager is a physiotherapist. My manager's great, but sometimes I think they might need this information, right? So they were finding it as a really helpful resource. So sometimes, even though that wasn't our original intent, was for that audience to pick it up, it's been really helpful and wonderful that it's been used in those ways. And then sometimes we do have managers who are looking themselves, or who have had the manager toolkit recommended to them by someone else who has been using it and finding it valuable. So that whole spreading the word piece is really important to us. We try to do that, but sometimes the most valuable thing is when our members themselves are looking at it and spreading the word and saying, hey, there's value in this, whether you're an RN in direct care, you can, share it with your manager, or whether you're a manager yourself, or whether you were sharing it with other people in other ways that help understand RNs and their practice. So we are still seeking feedback always from anyone that's using these documents, because we want to make them better. We want to, definitely add resources. We want to add topics. We do have a little parking lot where Terry and I park ideas until we can, find the time to develop them fully and add them to the toolkit. So any of that, we would be very, very happy to hear from you at any time.
And there is a link to a survey right on that landing page for the toolkit that we monitor and look for additional ideas. So if you want to if you think of something, you can just go into that survey real quick and add those topics in here.
Yeah, great point, Terry. Thank you. So I think we have a wrap-up poll. Before we go to that, I minimized my chat and question and answer boxes, but did anybody have questions that they wanted answered?
We haven't received any yet.
Okay.
So we'll, I think that's a good idea. We'll go to our poll, but please, if you do have questions or comments, please do add them in. There's been a couple different ones. So if you see a blinking orange box somewhere in your screen, that's where the chat is if you haven't found it. We will launch this last poll. It's got 3 questions. Just about whether you'd consider using the toolkit in your practice, if you would recommend it to others, and if you have some suggestions for other topics, what those might be. So I'll just give that a minute or two. It looks like everybody has responded. So people are using it, they are recommending it, and right at this point don't have any new suggestions or topics. So we did just get a question, are there any new topics you're working on? So there is that one that you talked about, Donna, the
electronic distractions.
Yeah.
And then we do have several. I should have looked at our parking lot, because we do have probably four or 5 things that we have taken note of over the past months, and they are there. But I'm sorry, I did not look at.
I know. I was just thinking that as well. Let's see if I can find that really quickly here. One of the ones that I've used recently was the graduate nurse practice. We've got a guideline about graduate nurse practice, but the at-a-glance document goes into a little bit more, some of those specific questions that people call about, really looking at, can they do this or can they do that? So just trying to do that. I can't. I'm not sure. Oh, here, just a minute. I think I found it. Yeah, the electronic devices, RNs floating to and from different units.
Yes.
We're looking at that one.
Mm-hmm.
There will likely be a cannabis one of some sort. We're still in the early stages of that. yeah, so some different ideas, but those two, especially the floating and the electronic distractions, are two that we're working on. And hopefully Donna and I have some time set aside this fall to do some work on that. So.
But at any point, if you or anyone who happens to watch this once it's archived have ideas for us, Terry and I would be thrilled to receive your thoughts and any feedback that you have for us.
And even if you have resources of topics that we've already developed, but you find a really great resource that you think other people would enjoy and have, take some value in reviewing, just send it to us and we'll take a look and see if we can incorporate it in. So we can do that as well.
One of the other things that I wanted to mention earlier, and I forgot about it till just now, was Terry and I had the opportunity at our annual meeting and conference in May to present this topic to the people that attended. And it was really quite a wonderful opportunity for us to present, but really more special because we had a couple of managers who came to share their perspectives on the toolkit and on the resources and how they were able to use them. So, definitely we're hearing that, the toolkit can be helpful and valuable. So, please, do use it, do share it, and do provide us feedback.
Yeah. So I think without any further questions, we'll talk a little bit more just for a few minutes about next week's webinar. This webinar is the toolkit. It isn't exactly the same as what Donna said the conference presentation was because we're missing our two manager colleagues. However, next week, the presentation is a repeat of one of the presentations that we did with that was presented as a concurrent session at our conference. And there's a special word that I can't pronounce. I'm not even going to try, but it means helping each other. And it's a concept that came about from a collaboration between the Kidney Health Community Program and the First Nations and Métis Health Department within the Saskatoon Health Region. So it sounds like a great topic. Because we were presenting, I didn't get to see this one at the conference, so I'm excited to see it next week.
Me too.
Yeah. And we've had, lots of our presentations, just like this one, are recorded. So if there's ones that you've missed, please feel free to go take a look at those on our Vimeo, and now we have a YouTube channel as well. You can access those from our website. This one will be posted in the next few days as well. So if you would like to share it with some other managers or colleagues, please feel free to. So I think that is it for today. So thank you again, Donna, for the collaboration and always being great to be presenting with.
Thank you.
Tony, for your support, and our attendees for taking the time out of their lunch hour to come and join us. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.